Are you an HR leader or have another role in an organization and you're tired of seeing people suffer? Well, welcome to our secret society where we're going to talk about those problems and what you can do to help fix them. I'm Dr. Alessandra Polizzi. I am the CEO of Verdant Consulting.
I'm Joanna Blomstrom. I'm a reluctant social entrepreneur. And together we talk about people, technology, and the workplace every week. Come join us.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to our secret society of human work advocates, looking for ways to make more people-centric and healthy cultures. I'm Dr. Alessandra Polizzi here with Joanna Blomstrom, and we are going to do a fun activity of going to our TikToks. We're both on TikTok, and talk about some of the latest videos we've seen.
Right. This is an experiment. We haven't really worked it out. We're not very smooth. So if you're seeing this on video, which I hope you are, otherwise this particular podcast might be slightly harder to figure out, but ideally still works on audio as well. It's because we have seen quite a number of things that we think are super relevant to anyone, and we would like to share them with you. We also thought it would be interesting to do a couple of them on a blind react. So again, maybe go and try and see this episode on video on our YouTube channel. But the reason we're doing this is because you probably have seen yourself that the world of HR has now slightly moved to TikTok, and we are discussing the latest trends of what happens in the workplace over there. Sometimes there's some uncovering to be done. Hopefully that happens in these few videos that we're going to show you. So let's get straight to it. And again, we warn you, a couple of these are blind reacts. We don't know what's in them, but a couple of them we are very aware what the theme is. So the first thing we wanted to show you today.
Follow you, Joanna. What is your handle?
All right. If they wanted to follow me, that is Joanna Blomstrom, I believe. And if they wanted to follow you?
I'm your HR big sister. So HR big sister.
I love that.
Look at that. Yeah, my big sister energy.
Right. And useful and necessary. Let's face it. We all need it. And God knows I am leaning on it a lot. So let's try this thing. See where we get to. If we are going to be showing you the first thing that has caught our eye. Right.
Okay, this is a great one. I picked this one before you hit play because there's a lot of talk about how the workplace is being impacted by Gen Z. For those of us who've been on this ride, we've seen the same kind of freak out when millennials join the workplace, but also when Gen Xers like myself joined the workplace. I remember being in a magazine where they had a woman with a mohawk and a nose ring, and it says, "Is this your CEO?" And yeah, I wish that journey had happened. But so I think it's really interesting about, and then talking about how organizations are doing people dirty in different ways. Let's watch.
Right. And on your screen, for anyone that's only listening to this and not seeing it, there's a lady that is going to be commenting on a Forbes article entitled "The 2024 Great Unbossing Trending Among Middle Managers' Careers in the Workplace." So let's see what she has to say. Hopefully you guys can hear it just as well. I'm going to attempt to do some sound magic here. Let's see what she is telling us.
I know we all love a solid, trending corporate word, so let me introduce you to unbossing. And if you're unfamiliar with the term, unbossing is removing middle managers from the hierarchical structure in companies. The article mentions that the great unbossing has come about because of tech advancements as well as economic uncertainty, and it's being branded positively by the companies that are adopting it because they're saying that now employees will be able to manage themselves. With this type of structure, really the thought is that there would be fewer bosses and rules, so the focus would really be on self-managed teams. Now, one of the pluses touted in the article is that this will provide a more direct line for employees to senior management. A downside highlighted in the article mentions that unbossing can lead to decreased employee morale, less opportunities for development, lower engagement, as oftentimes middle managers function as an essential conduit between employees and leadership at a company. What are your thoughts on this, and has your company implemented it?
Right. Let's
Okay.
chat about this a
So
little bit.
yeah, absolutely. So one of my clients is a teal organization. So the self-led teams concept is not new to me. However, in order to do that, you really have to have a very solid culture and psychological safety. Without it, this just absolutely does not work. And there's been research done on teal organizations and what makes them function. And it is the ability to speak up, ask questions, make mistakes, and all the things that make up a psychologically safe workplace. So just doing this as a cost cutting measure to me would tell me that they are setting this up for failure.
And we do have clients that are using people not tech who are TL organizations. I think it's an incredible concept. I've written about it quite a little bit in one of my books. I think where it works and in the industries where that is done properly from the ground up with a mind to genuinely push culture in the right direction, it is spectacular. We've had on the show not long ago, I don't know if you caught that one, the makers of Teal Unicorns, Dr. Cherry Wu out of Vietnam and her lovely husband Rob England have come and spoken to us about how they get those organizations to comprehend why they should drop structures. And one of the things that I took from that show is that their vocabulary and the concepts that they are throwing out there to leadership would absolutely stop them at the door of many organizations that you can think of today, in the sense that they talk about truth, they talk about beauty, they talk about value of humans, things that would absolutely not hold water in a middle tier HR organization of today, unfortunately. Obviously, if you are capable to do that radical of a thing, exceptional. If you're doing it as a cost cutting exercise, as Al is saying, a very bad idea.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
it.
And the other thing that, and she mentioned this or in the article as well, is that one of the downsides? The downsides are lack of development, disconnection from the business. We know that having a direct supervisor, and it can be a mentor, a coach, it can be movable team leads or different ways that you can create organization. But without that, people are just going to be floating around. And I've worked with enough executives to know that when there's distance, there's disdain. And so if you haven't been crossed their path lately, then chances are they're not going to be invested in you. So having this big span of control just means very little engagement. Now, I'm not arguing for people having hierarchical structures of command and control. We also know that that doesn't work. We have to upskill our leaders to be able to navigate these situations in an effective way.
I like that. I think TL organizations are ideal, and it would be miraculous that we manage that. Obviously, the more command and control we have, the worse it is. But to jump from here to there, we need a whole change of understanding as to who's who and what matters. And obviously, another thing that maybe we haven't mentioned that it's super important is to realize that if you do want to do that, if you do want to do away with the existing structures, which we encourage if you do that smartly, you should do it consciously enough and deeply enough that you have realigned your values, you have busted that dialogue open genuinely, and then you have ring-fenced the business processes in a sense that will still give you the knowledge that you're taking along fine in terms of BAU without it completely bringing you 10 years back. And I think that's really critical if you're going to be serious about the hierarchizations of organizations, if that is the thing, then you should probably take it back to genuine building blocks of what matters in your organization. Not against it, just not something that can be done haphazardly because we are finally sick of middle management.
Yeah, right. And let's talk about those building blocks and the role that this middle management role plays. Some of the social hazards come to mind, like role clarity. Well, if we have just truly flat organization, and then only senior managers knowing what my role is versus somebody else's role, how success is measured, kind of goes out the door. When we think about workload and understanding how the work gets done so that you're allocating the right amount of resources, again, my experience at the top of the house is that they don't know what resources are taken to get work done. And so you increase the risk of burnout within your organization. So those are just two of the psychosocial hazards that I think are very clearly at risk in doing something like this.
Right. But again, open it up, have those conversations. There are
Yes.
smart ways to do so. Just don't just jump into something because Forbes has to have gotten something. What is the next thing we're going to, if I remember
Let's
correctly?
talk about another kind of unbossing, which was the
Right.
Gen Z response.
Let's see about that. Let's see if I man this correctly this time. So the Gen Z responds to it all. Let's see. Maybe we even turn him up a little bit so you can hear what he's saying. And then there, for anyone who doesn't see this, on the screen, there's an article from Fast Company saying, why are Gen Z and millennial workers descending the corporate ladder? And this gentleman is going to kind of walk us through this. Let's see what he has to say.
A lot of Gen Zs and millennials do not want to climb the corporate ladder. They don't see the benefit. They know they're going to have more responsibilities and have to work longer hours, nights, weekends, vacations, and they're not having that. But also, they can't stand this micromanaging leadership style that exists at the top of organizations. They want to feel trusted. They want flexibility. And they are less interested in leadership because of this, because they don't want to have to deal with other people keeping track of all their moves and being big brother.
Right. So that's the flip side that he's talking about to a degree, if you want to think about it that way, in the sense that he sees that as a reaction to people not wanting to go into leadership whatsoever. In particular, the younger they are, the less interested they are. But I think it's a much more nuanced topic in the sense that I see a lot of willingness to redefine life and work in the new generations. And I think this lack of willingness to just become stuck in a corporate structure is not necessarily to do with climbing it, is to do with remaining in that corporate structure for any length of time. I think there's less and less of the new generation that would have as a life goal to retire with a watch or a plaque or a pen anymore. So I think that's part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other part is how we've defined what it means to be a good leader is by definition is by burning yourself out, right? So, you give, we promote servant leadership, which I support servant leadership to some extent, but not at the detriment of the mental health of the leader themselves. And we know from research, and this has been very consistent, that the higher up you go in the organization, the worse your mental health is. And that being responsible for other people has been identified by the World Health Organization as a threat to your mental health. And it's funny because, that's an area that we specialize in. And every time I share that, there's not one, I have not had one person disagree. And so we're living in this context of accepting that that's okay. If we accept that to be the only option, which it doesn't have to be, then yeah, they're opting out. I'd rather have
That's a very interesting point, and we might not talk about it enough as much as we would like, because we kind of return to this. It's leaders' fault that organizations are non-generative and they aren't as open and as vulnerable and as empathic and as servant as we would like them to be, and all that is 100 million% true. Nothing of what we're saying today contradicts the fact that we have a genuine leadership crisis where leaders are unprepared for being the things they need to be for their people. That still stands 100%. But in the situation we are in today, in the human debt ravaged world of business, the leaders we do have are burning out at a much faster rate than everywhere else. And the rate of suicide is incredibly high in the ranks of those people that are exceeded a certain amount of power in organizations. We know that. Obviously, it's very hard to unpack that data and to figure out whether it just happens to be the life stage that corresponds and the gender. I don't want to name them necessarily, that corresponds to the higher suicide rate. But equally, we know it's not an easy gig. And when people look at it from the outside and new people look at it, they obviously will have a rejection towards it. Again, I think this is not us saying, we shouldn't have servant leaders and we shouldn't have people wanting to be empathic leaders and vulnerable leaders and leaders who apply themselves. We are just saying that there has to be a lot more resilience in these people and a lot more inbuilt adaptation for those that have taken on the leadership roles to kind of make sure that they take care of themselves. And something that we say a lot, but I don't think it's said enough, is the vast majority of leaders are not. The vast majority of leaders are people who have accidentally stumbled into people management of sorts. They have been given a team. They have been taken from their operational or technical role and asked to kind of deal with these humans. They have, out of just the goodness of their hearts, really applied themselves and attempted to do a good job. So it's very easy to see why they would suffer more. So obviously, coming into the workplace and seeing people suffering is not something that you'd want to aspire to. But again, overall, do they even want to stay with a company? Do you believe that the younger generation has long-term plans to remain employed with Amazon come hell or RTO?
I mean, I think no, because of the last two things you just said. But I think if you have an organization that can help people grow and flourish and learn new things, that there would be no reason for them to leave. I think back to the preparation of managers. So I've been in leadership development for 20 plus years for a wide variety of companies. And our leadership development tends to be the equivalent of handing someone who's been a passenger in a car the keys to go drive it. Just because I've seen it driven doesn't mean I know how to do it. And so, but that's what we do all day, every day. And to your point, these are not roles that people necessarily sought out. It is how we compensate people. And some companies have started to kind of change that. But what we haven't done, and even with EQ, what we haven't done has been to have them look at the human behind the title. So making leaders aware that there are specific hazards to their mental health, like loneliness, and giving them the skills to navigate that. That's not, a well-being strategy. That's leadership competency to stay healthy so they don't burn out, so then they can take care of their teams.
100%. And in that same vein, I think it should be mandatory that most organizations provide leaders with one-on-one coaches. I think that genuinely has to become the norm. And in that same vein, the younger generation understanding that there will be an element of body doubling, there will be an element of potentially job sharing. There are some models out there that are attempting that. I believe that if they think that the role becomes that more of a team than of an individual, that they will be a lot more interested in that particular bit of the gig. But again, that we will make them super excited about becoming corporate is probably a very
Probably
fun.
another stretch. While you're pulling up the next one, when I was doing research on my next book, I read an article about, it was a dissertation on AI as the perfect manager. And like the future of management, because it's not biased. It knows how to provide feedback in a healthy way. And it just was chilling.
Right. It was chilling because it's very likely, isn't it? Right. Let's see where we go with that, and let's see what this gentleman has to say. This is a blind react for me, so we'll have to see where we get to.
Did y'all see that video of the guy talking about descending the corporate ladder? If you didn't, here you go.
This may be controversial, but I'm trying to descend the corporate ladder. I just think it's better for mental health.
Not only is it better for mental health, it's also a very unique phenomenon to Gen Z. I want to say Gen Z and millennials. We're probably the first two generations to actively separate our self-worth from our career employment. And because of that, we recognize that our place of employment is just a place to meet ends. Some people don't even want to ascend the corporate ladder, period. Any ladder at that point. Like I done held leadership positions in corporate, the military, academia. The higher up you go, the more stress you get. And if everything else outside of work is stressing you out, why would you want to compound that by getting more stress at work? Work should just be a means to the end, a way to pay your bill. The goal professionally to be the most overpaid support character. Be the most important component of the wheel. You don't want to be steering that thing, trust me.
Right. That's exactly it. That's what we were saying, isn't it? At the end of the day, that that's the feeling that people are getting. There's very little reward for a whole lot of pain.
Absolutely. I mean, I show when I teach my leadership burnout class, I show this data that shows that like 60% of managers don't eat a lunch. They skip a meal every day because of their jobs. They don't take vacations. They don't sleep. They bring stuff home for work. And everyone is like nodding, like that's just the job. And it wreaks havoc. The other thing is when you can see what burnout actually does to the team, it decreases their psychological safety. It increases, 26% their workload. And so the thing that leaders are self-sacrificing is not really working anyway.
100%. And the fact that we're putting human beings into those situations, it's quite it's quite immoral, to put it mildly. And it is something we're doing readily as society. The burnout that you're talking about, it exists at a certain level. And again, I know that people just shrug their shoulders and they like to point out at the fact that there are insane CEO remuneration packages out there. But I'd like us to kind of take a second and acknowledge that, first of all, those numbers that exist for a handful of individuals in the world are absolutely not reflective of what leadership gets paid on a day-to-day basis. In fact, if you look at the numbers, the difference between having a leadership position and not having a leadership position in the same kind of band is probably, it's really minimal. I don't remember the numbers exactly right now, but it's 1-digit percentage difference between someone who also has to do all the line management and to kind of go through the one-on-ones and ensure that they have the well-being of humans on their hand, and someone who doesn't have to do any of that responsibility simply delivers on their technical job. We will have to agree that 1-digit percentage is not something that pays for that type of sacrifice. So anyone out there who says, yes, but they are paid billions, is really wrong. That's not at all what's happening at large.
Rare exception. And let me add to that. And if you're a woman in a leadership position within a male-dominated field, the research shows that the likelihood of you being harassed increases when you move into a management position. So not only is the compensation relatively small, the risk to your mental health and to other, threats increases as you move up. So it becomes kind of problematic of what's it.
I wish I had the numbers at hand, and I don't, and that's part of my eternal ADHD problem. But I have seen just last week a statistic that said the average tenure for women in technology who are in leadership positions was, I think, 7 years. It's something minuscule. So that is not the type of thing that anyone could be doing for a lifetime. It's a very short career. It's almost shorter than being an ice skater, is how long you're going to survive being a woman in technology. So I think that's something that we should all keep in mind and kind of try and work around. I mean, these are terrifying statistics, and I know we don't do anything with them other than kind of pull the signal here and attempt to kind of arm you with the knowledge that this is clear. But to a degree, we're just so focused on making sure that this tribe of ours that's attempting to make change has enough of these levers of data in hand to kind of be able to stop those silly board meetings where these things are glossed over because they are this important.
Yeah, good point.
I think we had a couple of other things. Let me see if I can get back to them. So one of them, oh no, it's not as straightforward as that. I'm not the technologist I'd like to believe I am. But I have been dying to see this lady. I've seen her talk about a couple of other things before. So let's see. So the title of this short video, everyone, is Generation Z. You have done what no other generation has done in the workplace. Let's see what this genius thing is.
Generation Z, you have done what no other generation has done in the workplace. You have said no. You've said no. You said no to bad bosses. You said no to getting paid less. You said no to doing work, extra work, just because the company wants you to do it. I have been a career coach for over 20 years. I've been working since I'm 15, so that's 42 years, and I never thought that I would see something like this ever in my lifetime. Boundaries, a generation with boundaries that says, no, it doesn't work for me. And not only have you impacted every single generation before you, you have made a difference for every generation that comes after you. You have given them courage to stand up for themselves and say, no, you have changed the workplace forever. I want to applaud you. I am so proud of you. And I just want to say thank you.
Bless her. I think she's absolutely right, isn't she? She has a world of correct observation here, because indeed this is a different world than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, what is the key thing that you think that people should pay attention to with that?
I think boundaries is the key word here, and the fact that people have come in as a whole individual who knows who they are and believe that they need a certain amount of things. This is very basic adaptation, things that we didn't even know the vocabulary of, which let me tell you, boundaries is a new word to us. Adaptation is a new word to us. All of these things are brand new. This was not in the vernacular of business a minute ago. When you guys were just born, when we were trying to make you happen and we were trying to get those IVF going, that was not a word that we had. But the fact that they exist now as a vocabulary for all of us, and we can have these conversations under those terms, are thanks to this generation, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's interesting about boundaries is that you really only need to pay attention to them when people are crossing them. And so our generation, for sure, the one before us, but especially ours, had zero. It was all hustle culture and, think and act like an entrepreneur. And I was guilty of the same thing of like, oh, you have to, think about work constantly in order to be value add. And we gave up all those boundaries. And one of the reasons why I hypothesized that COVID had such a big impact on the world of work is it gave us the space to pause and look up and realize what we had been doing with our lives and that we hadn't set those boundaries.
Very, very true. The moment of breath and of reevaluating and of looking inside is what we collectively as humans needed. And this is being brought back into the workplace by this generation. I talk a lot about this in my other podcast called Neurospicy at Work, because the realization that one is neurodivergent and that one should be respectful of their existence when they come back into the workplace and they offer themselves to the workplace is something that's very new. Again, this did not read quite like this 10 years ago, that's for sure, or 15. But it is something that we have to lean into severely. We should make it into law really quickly. We should make it into policies in any workplace where we can. We should make very basic things such as everyone coming in with a README, a workplace policy. I can't believe that this is not something that has become at scale a process that every other HR department has taken on, because it is incredibly simple to do and monumentally different for the lives of everyone that does interact with these separate READMEs. For anyone who hasn't heard the idea, it's really simple. Once you start in a team, and when that team introduces themselves to you, there is an exchange of these mini documents, if you wish, that just explain how you function, what you know about yourself, what you're willing to disclose, and what things you'd like to see happening within your potential context of your potential workplace, what would be able to happen so that you are more accommodated and you feel like you're landing on your true self, you're giving yourself properly to work in a way that doesn't cut over these boundaries that we're discussing. So if everyone just did that simple exchange at the very beginning of a team working together, or anytime that someone new comes in, you'd have a very different world.
I've never heard of that. README is that what it's called?
Right. README. So
Interesting.
READMEs come from the fact that every program used to come in with a little bit of a, this is what it's meant to do, just a documentation. That's same thing, but for humans, where you might want to say nothing much. You might say, I'm fine. I work just like everyone else. I'm neurotypical. I don't need much of anything. But you might have a full page of, right, I can't be called. Please try to not call me. Call me if something's burning, but don't otherwise. Or I get mad RSD when you criticize me. Could you tell me some other way? As long as we kind of all enter with these presentations of your calling card of what you'd like to see happen in your work life, ideally you can put those together, and the good manager and the good facilitator will be able to just kind of make a nice little play out of it. We have one in the software where people just sit down, read the various readmes, exchange kind of where they see the intersection, see how their work days could be separated differently, and then going at it, the very feeling of I have been seen, I have been taken into account, there will be potentially accommodation where possible for me, is giving that team a lot more oomph than otherwise. So I think it's a really, really easy trick that anyone can take and implement tomorrow. You don't need budget for that. You don't need the CEO to agree for that. You just can start it tomorrow.
No, that's amazing.
Speaking of Gen Z, there was one that we wanted you to see as well.
We're doing another one?
Right. One
All right.
more, I think. Then there's one that we gotta talk about, a bit different, but it's not on the theme, but it's something we need to discuss because it's terrifying and interesting at the same time. Anyhow, speaking of what you were saying earlier, this lady on the screen, for anyone not seeing, is talking about how young Americans are finally ditching girl boss culture and Gen Z is done with hustle culture. So I have to say there are thousands of these going around these days, and I've written about it multiple times, but I feel it in my bones, having spent 20, 30 years, kind of being at the top of companies and at the top of various organizations. It's a hard one to let go of, if you wish. Together with the unmasking of who we really are as leaders, as humans, as females, as neurodivergent individuals, that comes with it, but it hits right at the center of what we've built our professional identities on. So let's see what she has to say and learn.
Young Americans are finally ditching girl boss culture and the toxic hustle culture of past generations. And instead of working themselves to the bone for minimal reward, they're actually prioritizing work-life balance. Wages aren't keeping up with inflation, which is making it hard for them to hit milestones like home ownership. Resume Lab did a study and found that 83% of Gen Z would consider themselves job hoppers, and that regardless of the company culture or how long they've been there or how much they like the company, they are more worried about getting paid more. So they'll leave and go get a better paying job. And that in another study, over 40% of Gen Z are actually doing a full-time 9-to-5, but doing a side hustle as well. A lot of them apparently are turning to investments like cryptocurrency and real estate in order to secure their financial future. They know that solely relying on your employer is not the vibe anymore.
Well, yes and no. I think she's a little bit contradicting herself there, unfortunately, because as she well put it, it's really difficult not to girl boss and not to hustle when you have to because you financially still need it. And
Right.
yeah, and that's where the problem is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that what's interesting about that is just how we define what work is and what it means to be employed. And I mean, we've had so much where people have identified as their job. I mean, I was guilty of that too. But I think the combination of generation that had a traumatic event during their formative brain formation and brain development called COVID, and a gig culture, a gig economy that's continuing to grow, you have people who are easily activated, and abandoning your job is one way that coping mechanisms from trauma can show up, which is flight, right? And so you've got, and then the opportunity around the gig economy. So I think that there's this kind of melding together of those in an interesting way that's causing people to question, what is capitalism? What is the purpose of money? What is the purpose of life? And let's toss in there the digital nomad concept. I mean, you and I both are not living in one place, right? So for me, I'm traveling every few weeks to different parts of the country, different parts of the world as a digital nomad because I can. And I like seeing places. So I'm not the only one doing this. This is something that a lot of people are doing, that one, it decreases your cost because you can live anywhere. And you get to really experience other parts of the world and other cultures.
Right. It's a combination of many, many factors, some of which are really good and some of them are really, really sad, actually, but they're still there. So where we are at is where there's a lot less emphasis, and this is positive, obviously, a lot less emphasis on work being what should define us. You only have to spend 5 minutes on an episode of Downton Abbey to know that we are not there anymore, where we live and breathe what we do. With that said, the in-between parts where we were all sacrificing life and limb to get to a goal and to really hustle hard, those don't necessarily disappear. And I think I would caution against us putting labels on what people do at a macro level, because it is more of an attitude to a day-to-day that is probably the culprit we should look at today, in the sense that if at all the new generation is going to help us keep these boundaries, the boundaries should be around how much of ourselves are we willing to give at any one point to whatever we are doing at that time. And whether we choose several of those endeavors or we choose one and we leave it often and so on, that might be a little less important. But I think what really matters is how much are we really spending of our emotional capital, of our intellectual capital, and of our best years in the work realm. But like you very well said, thanks to AI, thanks to digital finances, thanks to a couple of the big things that have happened over the last 10 years, really, we can and should look at the economy and say, are we going the right direction? Is this capitalist thing going to last whatsoever? And we know it's not. I mean, if you look at the 1972 theories, if you look at everything that suggests we probably have another few years of this only, it's almost tempi passati to be discussing the economy as it is today, as those structures are not fit for purpose and they're crumbling as we're looking at them. But of course, anyone listening to this has lived through the same probably past that we have, where, from a very personal perspective, I never really quite understood why people would stay in one industry. I've moved industries 3 or 4 times over my life, moved from fintech to agile and DevOps, and from technology to the people business and back around. I never really comprehended the barriers between them, really, and they don't make sense if you stop to think about them. And if you have a neurospicy brain, they make zero sense, and there's no reason to have these delimitations between things. So I can completely understand the need that's a lot more pregnant today for people to kind of not job hop, but change and learn and evolve in different ways that is no longer bound by these constructs of industry or time, or the very silly things we used to keep as markers of success before don't exist anymore. Companies are not more worthwhile if they've had the retention of 100,000 bums on seats. That's not what's going to be the going forward marker of success, but more that you are efficient with however few people and AI you might be having, and that those people you have that are working your AI are happy enough, have boundaries, have provided the AI with the README, and everyone's going home to have a relaxing evening.
Well, and I'm just going to add one more thing to this, which is the other piece. You're painting a very interesting picture of the AI, which I do not want to gloss over, but is that research shows, this is common sense, but research shows that when you changing jobs is the best way to get a pay increase, right? And so as long as we continue to understaff and under-resource and not pay people living wages, then they're going to keep moving and pushing the market to go up and up and up, because we haven't adjusted for inflation, cost of living. Somehow we've allowed companies to have only those few at the very top making the bulk of the money, and then everyone else struggling. So I think that's also part of the job hopping mentality as well.
We should do an entire episode on compensation and whether that's fair at all, whether that's correct at all, whether we are compensating on things that are worthwhile or not. I think that's a good one. Yeah, that's going to be a good one. But speaking of jobs and so on, let's not forget that we are going through a horrible market moment in many economies and in many various parts of industries. Like in the technology realm, you have over 230,000 people who have lost their jobs over the last 2 years. There is an insane influx of individuals on the market. It's really difficult to now look at the market without noticing that there are really good names, really good heads that are struggling to find a good place. So we've talked about this tangentially before, but there's a lot of the ins versus the outs when it comes to people that are in situ in jobs versus not. And I think a very interesting tie-in will be this last one that we're going to let you see, and we will just give it to you without comment at first, because if what this gentleman has to say is even remotely the case in many places, then it explains what we're seeing in the job market these days. We're just going to look at this one bit where there's a discussion about what's happening to jobs. And on the screen right now, a young man is talking about, or has written that he has gotten fired from his second job because he wouldn't post a ghost job.
I got fired from my second job because I wouldn't post a ghost job. So let me explain what I do for my second job, what I did for my second job. I was a hiring manager. I usually just post job listings sometimes on Indeed or other job listing websites for my company. I'm not going to explain what company that is because I can't do that. But I am going to talk about what I can talk about because I read through my NDA. I used to post ghost jobs, which are fake jobs to encourage our current employees to work harder. These jobs will be fake jobs, so you can apply for the listing but not actually get hired. They're called ghost jobs. You're probably wondering, I applied for all these places, why am I not getting callbacks? You might have applied for a ghost job, which isn't a real job. It's just put there to show that we're looking for new hires at higher rates to get our current employees to work harder, as an incentive to make them work hard, as opposed to increasing the base pay or the base rate. And I've made maybe 300 ghost job listings. I've made a lot. I've made so many. It's insane. And what messes me up is that they're still doing it. And I got into a little bit of a scuffle, a fracas, one might say, with my previous hire manager. My hire manager said, hey, you stopped posting ghost job listings. What's going on, buddy? It's really working. It's helping our team morale. I said, listen, this is the first time I've ever said this in my life. I don't feel good about doing this. This might be the first time I've ever said that. Usually I have like no moral, no ethics about anything. I just didn't feel good at all about doing it, despite the fact that I was getting a massive bag from it. And he said, well, we need somebody to do it, and you're the best we've got. I'm not going to continue to post ghost job listings so our employees can act like they are scared to lose their jobs. That ruins their mental. It destroys their mental health deeply. And he said, that's HR's job, not ours. So I'm talking to him, and I'm arguing. And at this point, he's shouting, I'm calm. So I'm thinking I can take it to HR, and he says, you know, we're probably going to have to talk about this later, but you should clock out for the day. I said, I don't want to clock out for the day because we're not done talking about the specific issue. This is insane. This is psychotic. So I go cool off. I talk to my friends in the Discord. We're cooling off. We're talking about it. Another one of my friends does the same job as I do. He also posts ghost jobs. And it's disgusting. It's not just my company. It is every company I'm seeing doing this. It's Walmart doing this. It's Amazon doing this. I'm not going to disclose my company, but it's Best Buy doing this. They're posting these fake job listings to trick you into thinking, oh, well, they're hiring a bunch of other things, or because just in case you're looking to move to a new job or talk about needing a pay raise, and they'll post a new job at a higher rate. Say you got hired in at $17 an hour. They'll post a ghost job at $22 an hour. And if you try to apply for that, they'll clock you for that. If you try to apply for that, they'll clock you for that, and they'll know it's you because they got your social security number and you applying for the job. It is a disgusting business practice. Because as soon as you apply to get a higher position or anything like that, they'll talk to you about it. And they'll ask you, why do you want a higher position? Do you want more pay? Are you dedicated to the company? They'll give you a performance review. They'll check everything about you just to see. I recommend, this is my honest opinion, this is my honest recommendation, doing the bare minimum at jobs. Bare minimum. I mean bare minimum at jobs. Just coast. Just coast by doing the bare minimum at jobs. Don't try to do anything extra or crazy. Just coast by doing the bare minimum at jobs. I'm so serious. Because I didn't know this was so much of it. I thought it was just my job doing this. I thought we were like the monopoly on doing this. That's what I thought. But I'm applying to other jobs. I'm applying to other places, and I'm noticing the ghost jobs. I'm noticing that there are many of them. There are so many ghost jobs that are just fake. They're just fake jobs. I am sickened. I'm disheartened. I'm disgusted. I'm angry because I don't have my second job anymore, by the way. It was a small job. I worked 20 hours a week just doing the analytics and the hiring for a company. That's all I did. But I still work at Amazon. But man, I'm just sickened. Amazon doesn't care about what I post, by the way. They're fine with me doing whatever. Amazon doesn't check anything I do. They don't care about me at all. But man, this is stupid. This is weird. Look up ghost jobs. Just look them up.
I think we're going to leave it at that. He does go on to kind of talk about his particular HR issue, and I shudder to think how unresolved it remains. But we watch this, so you don't have to. And if you are one of the people that have ghost jobs on their consciousness, we don't envy you. It must be horrible going to sleep at night. Because just the amount of hope and the amount of building in people's heads when they believe they're going to be getting a job that then ends up being nothing is hard to underestimate, because the reality of it is anyone who I call this steaming with in apply on LinkedIn. It's a new term I was laughing with my team about the other day, which is essentially people who will just in apply because they do match that potential description, but they do it more for a bit of a kick of, wouldn't life be nicer if I were to move to Malta or to Palo Alto and start this one job. But obviously that's not a great response to what the market is throwing at them either. But people do that because of that millisecond of dopamine injection you're getting from imagining a potential alternative future for yourself. But if you extrapolate that to the genuine effort of writing a cover letter, of rewriting your CV, of putting yourself in the shoes of this full new life you're going to have should you be accepted for this job, only to be doing that for something that never ever existed is just genuinely despicable in my view.
Well, and I think agree. And the motivation behind doing it makes zero sense. Well, one, if I'm posting jobs in order for my employees to work harder, I've already accepted that they're out looking at jobs, right? Like,
Right.
why said that? Oh, well, when they search and they're going to see there's other jobs like theirs. I mean, I don't understand that logic because that would tell me,
Right.
oh, look, they're going to be resourcing more people. Like
Mhm.
most people don't think that their job's being replaced. Now, having been in charge of recruiting before myself, we would post jobs that weren't necessarily specifically open, but more building a pipeline. So we had we always knew we needed salespeople. So we would post sales jobs and we would say approximately this region. We don't know 100%, we're not 100% sure because we wouldn't want to be empty. But we were very transparent about that. We weren't posting it and then, never looking at the applicants. But I have seen people post jobs before there's an opening, but I've never seen them post a job with zero intent of ever hiring. That's just something that's very new. Very
It's
new.
new and horrible and it's terrifying. And it's there's so many levels of wrong there. I like that response about that's not our problem. It's a chart problem. It's I have a really big bugbear about hiring and recruitment being separate from the people business in many ways and what kind of interaction that creates. But also the fact that every company that is lowering themselves to flooding the market with what looks like jobs, and then that becomes a data point for how well your economy is doing. I do have to wonder whether any of the numbers we're seeing at all are in effect anywhere for it.
Yeah, it's a fair
Right.
point.
This
Sorry.
is not a good thing to end it on. But if you're listening to this, what we cover today is that tier organizations are a fun, ideal thing to strive towards. Ideally, we'll be working in places where we've exchanged readmes, and yet the hierarchical structure doesn't matter because they are generative. They don't have the human debt that's been knocking us down for as long as it has. Again, ideally, there would be no fake jobs in those organizations. But we've this TikToks and more, so you don't have to. And we'll talk to you next week about this and many, many more things: HR, people, human debt, tech debt, and just individuals in the workplace related.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. Bye.